Ghana's long-standing trade agreement with the US under AGOA expired on the midnight of September 30th, 2025. A minute later, the US government shut down. So it is safe to say renewing trade relationship with the continent of Africa is not the priority of the US government and probably won't be for a very long time. What does that mean for trade between the US and Ghana as well as other African countries? And why is this important? These are the two questions I'm looking to answer today on this platform. My name is Enebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer based in the US. And let's get into it. Let's start with some history, walk to the present, and speculate about the future. History. Before the 90s, the basis of relationship between the US and any country in the world was where they stood on the Cold War. So if you were a country who was an ally of the Soviet Union, the US wasn't trading with you. If you were a country who the US considers an ally, the US traded with you. So trade before the 90s for the US was based on geopolitics and nothing else. But the Cold War ended. So in the 90s, some businessmen in America saw an opportunity that now US relationship with other countries is going to be based on what the US businessmen or the US business community can get from that country. And so from the 90s, the US government started looking at trade from a different angle. The US president at the time, Bill Clinton, visited Africa for, I think he spent 8 to 11 days in Africa. A few of those days was spent in Ghana. And he made a proclamation that the future of the US and Africa is not going to be based on aid, but based on trade. And in keeping up with that promise he made when he was in Ghana, Bill Clinton signed something called the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act on May 18th, 2000. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act was part of a series of trade reformation laws that the US was working on in 2000, known as the Trade and Development Act. So, under AGOA, African countries could export raw material to the US at zero tariff. So, duty-free export from Africa imported into US started in 2000. And as of, I think, 2024, in the year 2024, about $500 million of goods under AGOA was exported from Ghana to the US. Other African countries like Kenya and Nigeria export even more than Ghana, right? But Ghana is one of the countries that have benefited from AGOA. But the US have also benefited from AGOA. But we'll get back to where the US has benefited. Let's come back to AGOA, the bill or the law. When AGOA was passed, the US put some conditionalities that a country must meet to qualify for duty-free or zero tariff when doing business with the US. And these eligibilities or conditionalities were, number one, you have to be a sub-Saharan African country, which Ghana is. Number two, you have to be a market-based economy, which Ghana has been since the 80s. You know, we went through some diversification process in Ghana in the 1980s. And so we've been a market-based economy since then. Political plurality, which Ghana have been since 1992. We've had democracy in Ghana since 1992. Eliminating barriers to US trade. This is why I say I'll come back to how the US benefits. So for you to get zero tariff from the US, you have to give the US something. So it wasn't free that Africans were just allowed to sell stuff to the US. How President Trump, when he was putting tariff on goods around the world earlier this year, he said that countries were ripping the US off. But I don't think any African country has been ripping the US off. AGOA ensured that African countries gave the US something to get something. Another one, they have to be not engaging activities against US national security and interest. And this is interesting because this can be interpreted in different ways. So, for example, not engaging in activities against the US national security interest could mean that you have to support the US national security interest. Some countries, wink wink, Ghana, have interpreted that to mean supporting the US national security interest. So Ghana, as an ally or trade partner of the US, have always met the eligibility standards of AGOA. So if AGOA is an exam, Ghana is an A plus country. And so in AGOA, under AGOA, a lot of goods, about 60,000 worth of goods have entered the US duty free 60,000 different types of goods have entered the US duty free from Ghana and other African countries. Actually, the African countries which have benefited most from AGOA have been Kenya, Nigeria, and Angola. Kenya and Nigeria have been countries that have taken advantage of AGOA more than Ghana has. But this is a fascinating fact for people who didn't know this. Before AGOA, US only imported gold and cocoa from Ghana. After AGOA was passed, US started importing textiles and apparel from Ghana. And guess what? Shea butter. Americans call it shea butter, Ghanaians call it shea butter. So Ghana started exporting shea butter at a large quantity to the US in 2000. So I was about to make a joke. I'll refrain from that. So, you know what? Let me still make that joke. There is a certain class of African Americans who are known for wearing shea butter. On social media, some of them are called shea butter Twitter. So those shea butter people would have existed if AGOA wasn't passed in 2000. So President Bill Clinton did a good one for the black community in America. But that's just a joke. Shea butter is used in a lot of cosmetic products in the US, not just the African Americans who use it. Most cosmetic products either use shea butter or oil palm as part of their ingredients, right? So the US cosmetic department or the fashion world have benefited a lot from AGOA as it stands now. So now, what did AGOA mean for Americans? What did AGOA benefit Americans? So if you're a Ghanaian, you know that Ghanaians' favorite part of the chicken is what? The chicken thigh. Americans call chicken thigh chicken legs. And actually, Ghanaians and Americans don't enjoy the same parts of the chicken. So while Ghanaians like the chicken thighs, or as Americans will call it chicken legs, Americans like maybe whole chicken or chicken breast or what they call the chicken thighs, right? So the part of the chicken, which is the thighs, wasn't used in America as much. So AGOA provided an opportunity for American farmers to make extra money with chicken thighs or chicken legs. So that is why if you are anywhere in Ghana, one of the easiest things you can buy if you are broke is chicken thighs. Right? So chicken thighs becoming part of the party life in Ghana is because of AGOA. American farmers started exporting chicken thighs to Ghana. As it stands now, over 90% of chicken consumed in Ghana is from the US. Yeah, we dey eat American chicken. And actually, what is This is crazy stats. AGOA was passed in 2000. By 2003, chicken imports to Ghana from the US rose by 300%. It was so much so that, as it stands now, the local chicken industry in Ghana is non-existent. Right? Ghana's, I don't know if you know this, but in the year 2000, there was a guy, before 2000, 1996, there was a guy who ran for president of Ghana called Akufo Addo. This guy was so rich from selling chicken that he was able to run for president. As it stands now, I don't think there's any chicken farmer in Ghana who can run for president just from selling chicken, right? My point is, AGOA unfortunately killed the chicken industry in Ghana, but helped grow the chicken industry in the US and also added chicken to the taste buds of Ghana. Actually, chicken consumption in Ghana went up by about 95% since the year 2000. Ghanaians were not eating that much chicken before 2000. Fish and eggs, yes. Chicken, no. So, AGOA has benefited the US farm business, right? Killed the Ghana farm business. And what else? Rice. In the 2000s, there was something that became known as Rice Master Stamp. Rice Master Stamp was a stamp that was created by American rice growers to indicate that the rice you are buying in Ghana is grown in the US. Why? The US started exporting rice to Ghana. So Arkansas, where I used to stay before moving to Texas, is one of the biggest growers of rice in the world. I believe Arkansas is the number one grower of rice in the world. But before 2000, rice grown in Arkansas and other parts of the US were not imported to Ghana. After AGOA came into place, rice from the US is now imported in Ghana. So there was a time there was rice brands like Texas Star and the rest, where there was this ad that was on TV when I was a kid. There was this girl who was eating rice, and then after eating the rice, she got the skills to be able to play basketball. That's because it's a US grown rice. So AGOA gave US farmers the chance into African market, and also in return gave African farmers the chance to the American market. By African farmers, I mean specifically shea butter farmers and cocoa farmers. He also gave textile makers the chance. For example, in Tema, there is a company called Ethical Apparel Africa that makes a lot of the uniforms and scrubs that nurses and doctors wear in the US, made in Ghana, shipped to the US. So all these products that are imported to the US from Ghana are now going to be charged 14% tariff. So the duty to export goods from Ghana and import them into the US is 14%, which was the tariff the US President Trump put on Ghana in, what's the name? Earlier this year. Why is this important? Before September 30th, the president of Ghana held a press conference and then said that AGOA would be expiring. So when AGOA expires, he's looking forward to doing a deal with President Trump, hopefully. And he's also waiting to see what the Supreme Court of the US will say about the tariffs that the US or President Trump have imposed. Now, all that means nothing. Because AGOA has expired, there is no other tariff that President Trump will be in violation of. I mean, the 14% tariff that President Trump have levied on Ghana is likely to stand. unless AGOA is renewed. And I said President Clinton signed AGOA in 2000. President Bush, who visited Ghana 2 times, renewed AGOA in 2008. President Obama, who also visited Ghana once, also renewed AGOA again in 2015. And what President Obama signed is what would be expiring, or what is expired on September 30th, 2025. So what that means is, as it stands now, there is no basis or there is no law that exists that holds the trade relationship between Africa and the US. There are some observers who were saying before the government shut down that Congress will probably pass a continuing bill or a continuing law to give African countries and the US a year or two to negotiate new terms. But with the government shutdown, that's probably not going to happen. So, what is going to happen in the future? Unfortunately, the answer is we don't know, because the answer is in the air. Usually, it gets renewed before it expires, but now that it has expired and hasn't been renewed, and President Trump is very big on tariffing every country in the world, AGOA probably is effectively dead and won't be renewed. So, what's the name? Ghanaian who love American chicken, something might have to happen between Ghana government and the US government, because if the US is going to put tariff on goods being exported to Ghana, Ghana probably also have to start putting tariff on US chicken and US rice. Why? Because AGOA was why we were allowing free flow of this stuff, right? So brace yourself. There's probably going to be a chicken shortage in Ghana soon. Rice, not so much, because Ghanaians tend to consume a lot of Asian rice anyway. But if I'm going to predict, by December, there's going to be shortage of chicken in Ghana, which means that the price of chicken in Ghana is going to go up. The price of food always goes up in December in Ghana because that is, Christmas season, whatever. But this year, it's probably going to be worse. So Ghana's inflation, which stands at 11%, is probably going to get worse because chicken have become a big part of the eating culture in Ghana. That is my prediction. Let me know what you think, and subscribe to my channel if you like what I just shared with you, and leave comments